welcome to this new episode of the Swift Academy podcast. Today I'm very happy to be with Firas Safa, who is ex-staff iOS engineering at Yassir, and now a senior iOS developer at GetYourGuide. Really, I'm very happy to discuss with him, especially the topics of the role of staff iOS engineering. And first of all, thank you, Firas, for accepting the invitation. And how are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm great, actually. Just got back to Zurich, so excited.
Yes, before we last week we tried to prepare the discussion. You moved from Milano to
Yeah.
Zurich. I think it is great experience. You spoke about this in different article. I think last article about this experience, and also for the role of the iOS staff iOS engineering role, and for people that maybe who try to have information about your career, etc. Can you make a little presentation of yourself, and after that we can go to our topic.
Sure, absolutely. So I have around a decade of experience now in software engineering. I was originally from Lebanon. I moved to Italy to pursue my engineering degree at 18. I spent 15 years in Italy. I worked in many different companies, mainly in fintech and mobility. And after 10 years there in Italy working, I decided to move to Zurich. So I've been here for a couple of months now. It's really great. And yeah, as far as my career, mainly it was in iOS development. At the early stages, I did some cross-platform, backend, all these kind of things. So I have a general overview of everything. But my main focus has been iOS development and spoken at conferences all around Europe. It's something I love to do. I'm just sharing knowledge in general and writing articles. So yeah,
Yes, thank you.
that's briefly me.
I know that you are a great speaker, especially about design systems and about design and stuff like that. And at Swift Hero, if I remember this, thank you for all people at Swift Hero. They accepted us last year for presenting
Absolutely.
our framework about dependency injection. And it was a great experience in Italy, country that I liked very, very much. People know that. A lot of my friends know that. Okay, that was a little presentation speaking about Swift Hero and Italy. It's great, but now we try to speak about our topic. She's the role of iOS staff engineering. Wrote an article about this, and there is a lot of things that we try to discuss. But of part of our discussion, there is an ambiguity about this role. And when I try to prepare the discussion with you, inspired me about a book which who is the staff engineering path from Tanya Rilio. I think it's engineering manager at Datadog. And when I tried to read the book, there's some quotes said that if your job isn't defined, how do you know you are doing it well? Really, really, really fantastic quote in the book. That's why my first question, can you maybe confirm that there is a lot of ambiguity about this role of staff iOS engineering?
Absolutely. The staff position in general is very ambiguous and it changes from like one company to the other, depending on the company size, requirements, and so on and so forth. And especially like it's a fairly new position, especially like in Europe and in less like not in FANG per se. So a lot of people like don't know what a staff engineer does or a principal engineer does because we are for the most part wired like you code, you become a senior engineer. After that, you either stay a senior engineer or you become a manager. And the staff engineer is for those people who don't want to become managers, but they have much more to give, not only from a technical level, because there's a lot of politics as well that goes into the staff engineer role, but like to a lesser degree compared to a manager. So you do have to have soft skills, communication skills, not to the extent of the manager, but yeah. So a lot of like for many different reasons, like nobody really can give a specific definition to what a staff engineer does across companies because it really changes from one company and one context to the other.
That came to my question about do you expect this role? Do you have some kind of imagination about your role before you will being staff iOS engineering? Because I know that the job it's not. We find technical leader and a senior iOS developer. This role there is not a lot of people that play this role in many companies. This maybe manager role, senior role, technical leader role, and it was. I don't think that was very easy to. And from the expectation to the reality,
Yeah.
can you speak about this?
Absolutely. So the hard part for me was that I joined a company as a staff engineer. No, so if you're at a company as a senior engineer, you get promoted. I feel like it would be easier just because the promotion is the result of what you're already doing. So you are familiar with what is expected from you.
Yes.
Whereas in my case, like I joined Yassir as a staff iOS engineer, and it was my first time as a staff engineer. Like before I actually started working, I had so many questions and so many ideas that I think everybody has, and for the most part, they were wrong. Like mainly thinking that a staff engineer is like a super senior engineer, no, and it's really not that. Like the more I went to work and like especially after I got the book, I started reading, even like talking to my head of engineering at Yassir, what he expects from me. I had like especially during the first period, I had way more questions than answers,
Mm.
which goes back to the ambiguity of the position. But it's just like everything new you try, like trial and error, adapting to new inputs and try and like to understand what is required from you and delivering it to the highest level. And especially that, like within Yassir, we were 4 staff engineers, iOS, like staff
Mm.
iOS engineers, and
Yes.
every staff engineer was doing a totally different role, really. Because even in the book, you know, like they speak about different types of like,
Staff iOS
let's
engineering.
say, yeah, like archetypes. No, like you have the tech lead kind of archetype, the architect, the solver, and the right hand. No, and really, like each one of us was doing something different, not because we wanted to or because we thought that was the right thing, but more it was like what was the expectation from our head of engineering for our like department. No, looking from the outside, like I feel like I was one of the lucky ones there, like having worked with that head of engineering, which gave me a lot of flexibility, a lot of like space for experimentation and understanding how can I benefit the team in the best way possible without forcing me to do things that other staff engineers had to do, which made no sense. Like, for example, one of the staff engineers was required to attend every like scrum meeting for every squad he was managing now. So like you're
Mm.
spending 16 hours a week or 10 hours a week in meetings that bring you no value. And that's maybe because his expectation was the tech leader archetype, no, where you're like, I'm
Mm.
blocking everything at the moment, which shouldn't be what a staff engineer is about. As a staff engineer, you're more of like you should be more of a problem solver, like a bottleneck solve. Like like where's the bottleneck? What's causing the bottleneck? How can we solve it? And even understanding like how can you solve something before it becomes a bottleneck. So all those things you need to learn them as you do the things, and a lot of them have nothing to do with code. Like the least amount of code I wrote in my life was the 2 years I was a staff engineer.
Yes, yes. That's why maybe the role is defined by the head of engineering. And from your understanding, um, in he or she, when he tried to create this role, he based it about some philosophy about this role. Why we need to have this role. I think that the organization, Yassir, or any other company, it's not the main idea to speak about Yassir, but in every company that have this role, they try to think about this role, the need to have this role. I think for my point of view, it's a role that have impact on architectures, like you said, to detect some problems, bottoming, etc. That you, with your experience on code, you can challenge or can resolve issues related to this. But the problem that the team developers and maybe technical leader, lead developers, maybe didn't understand your role. This kind of role is invisible to the other part of the team. And that's why we can said about how we can measure success of this role. When you speak, you have the role, great salary maybe, all these things, but it's important that people understand the role and you are fine with the role. You can measure your success. There is like kind of KPI that can measure your success. What do you think about
So
that?
yes, no, absolutely. So the as you said, like the staff engineer's role is defined by the head of engineering, and but that's the thing. Like each head of engineering has their own philosophy as well. No,
Mm,
and but in general, one thing that like now with so many years at this point, with the staff engineer role being more and more defined, even though it's still like ambiguous for a
for
lot
a
of
lot of people.
companies and a
Yes.
lot of people, still like it's starting to be more and more accurate, because now so many companies are trying to have that role, so they're trying to understand, okay, what we need, do we need it, etc. No, and the success metric for it is really like, and this is like one of the main differences between a staff engineer and a tech lead. A tech lead's metric to success, if the team is shipping well, no, if they're meeting their deadlines, if there's no problems, like everything is going well from sprint to sprint or whatever the case might be.
Mm,
Whereas for and you can measure it immediately, no, like, hey, we've had 4 sprints, everything is going well, whatever. No? Whereas for the staff engineer, the success metric is more of like the company is moving like safer, faster, engineers are more satisfied. The things that you do will not be impactful within the next sprint or two, but you will see their impact way
mm,
down the road. No, like, and the thing is, like, you're impacting more because when you're a staff engineer, one thing is for sure, you're working with more than one squad. Whereas a
mm,
tech leader, usually have your squad, you're the tech lead of that squad, you're the point of reference. And for the most part, like, it really depends on the like structure of the company. But as a tech lead, you might have knowledge in different areas and you try to unblock all those. Like, you're not a superhero in one area, but you're like a tech lead. So you know iOS, you know Android, you know Backend, and you can like, you're like the more technical manager, let's say. So you can like the
yes.
engineering manager. So you're trying to help. The staff engineer is more focused on that technology, as well as like the company as a whole. Like, when you want to apply best practices, no, there's a lot of thing, like, for example, code quality, no,
Mm,
as a tech lead, you can impact like your team. You're like, okay, let's start writing this, doing that, etc. As a staff engineer, you try to understand, okay, how is the code quality impacting our work, and how can I make it better? What is it gonna unblock, not unblock, etc. Like, the difference between, like, one of the differences between a staff and a tech lead is a tech lead is focused on the now, no, like, how can I solve one issue now and move on? Whereas from a staff engineer point of view, it's like, how is this going to benefit the organization? Because a lot of the problems we try to solve don't bring any value to the stakeholders, no, like, at least
mm,
not directly. So a key thing to do as a staff engineer is translate those non like direct success metrics into something a stakeholder can understand and appreciate,
yes.
and its impact usually is seen in the long run, no, for example, like, one of the things I worked on that in the long run was beneficial was the hiring and firing process, for that matter, in my
Mm,
like in my role as a staff engineer, because when I joined, I felt like one of the main bottlenecks we had was the engineering quality in the team, no, like the commitment from different engineers, how bought in they are. Like, I expect excellence from anybody I work with because I try to
mm,
give my best as well, no? So, and we're not building rocket science. Like, we're not saving lives. I know that for a fact. But at the same time,
yes.
like, if we're like, I try to give my best, I expect everybody to give their best, because this is how you push each other to be better, no? So
Mm,
one thing I worked on with the head of engineering was assessing, like, okay, what do we need in this next couple of years? Like, what are the, from a technology point of view, from a commitment point of view, what are the things that we need? What is lacking, and what is the things that we need from our engineers? Assess those engineers. The ones that were not delivering were put on probation to like, hey, these are the things that you need to work on. Some went well, some they had to be let go, and as well as working on the hiring process, especially with the age of AI, understanding, like, okay, like the take
mm,
home test, how useful is this? Like, I remember
yes.
instances where I had people from the same company send the take home test with the same network layer. Like, identical because they are
Yes.
copying it from their code base, no? Which makes sense. Like I probably did the same when I applied, but that's what I'm saying. Like in an age where writing code is the cheapest like thing to do at this point, no? How can I make sure that who I'm hiring is good enough for me or for my company, no? And you can see that shift as well in big companies compared to smaller ones. Like, for example, Meta started doing AI assisted coding tests like a year
Yes.
and a half ago, no, 2 years ago. Now you're seeing medium-sized companies starting to do it, etc. The reason why Meta was able to do that was because you have that principal engineer, that staff engineer, those roles that are planning for 3-4 years ahead what the market will look like and how we can get ahead of the curve to get what we need to always
Mm.
be on top. No, those are things that a tech lead or the senior engineer obviously doesn't have. Like, it's not that they're not capable of, because it's everything is a skill that you learn, but you do not have the physical time to think about, no, or the cachet, or like a lot of things that need to go properly for you to be able to put on those strings.
Okay, great. I think that people may. I don't hope that the people understand the role of staff iOS engineering like kind of architect, that didn't have he didn't have or she didn't have any idea about the code, etc. That come to my question. Maybe you think that you can be directly staff iOS engineering before being a senior plus plus iOS developer. This kind of
Uh,
questions I
so
because why I try to ask this question, because about the it's related to authority of the staff iOS engineer. If he or she not was a great developer, famous developer, or it will not be easy to him to have this kind of I don't know. It's not respect, kind of respect if you can, because it's very important that um, I have this experience with some architecture in our company, other company that I work with. When he tried to make the PR from small worker, we are trying to discover what kind of code he wrote, because we think that it's like aliens that wrote code, and we try to discover what kind of things. Maybe they have new things in architecture, maybe the new things in Swift UI, maybe you say
yeah.
at this moment the role of staff iOS engineer in the mind of or in the mind of a lot of people think about a senior plus plus developer. Do you think you need to be a senior iOS developer to be staff iOS engineering?
So yes and no. So the reason I say that is, so obvious, like as I said, first of all, one thing I don't want to always repeat, it really depends on a company to company. By that I mean, like, for example, currently at GetYourGuide as a senior engineer, the flexibility I have in making decisions is way, like, I'm the senior iOS engineer for the transactions team, for the payments team, and I have the authority to do whatever I want in that module. I'm the only iOS engineer in that team, and I can do and that, like, responsible for that module. And for the better part, I can do whatever I want, obviously to a certain extent. But everything, like, we have a staff iOS engineer, but his role is not to dictate what we can or cannot use.
Very important.
Like, we have some stuff that are in Kotlin multi-platform, and it's because 2-3 engineers thought they can
Yes.
bring value by doing this, and they did it. So to a certain extent, there's a lot of things that we can do as a senior engineer, because the engineers that they are hiring as a senior engineers go through a hard process to get the job. So you are expected, like, a senior engineer there maybe can be a staff somewhere else, just like, for example, like a senior engineer at Apple most likely is a staff engineer somewhere else. No, so it really depends
Mm,
on like where you're working, what you're doing, what are the things you're exposed to, and more importantly, is where you're going. Because like I don't have the knowledge to be a staff iOS engineer at a gaming company, like even if they do iOS games, because I have no knowledge whatsoever of that world, of that domain. So
yes.
a huge part of becoming a staff engineer is understanding the domain, first of all. And in order for you to understand the domain you're working with, you need years and years of experience. So that's why I was saying, like, you need to become a senior plus plus engineer, because you become that by curiosity, by learning, by doing, by all of
Yes.
these things, no? And especially if you wanna, like, usually the road to becoming a staff engineer within a respectable company, if you're already a senior engineer, is by having your work impact not only your team, but teams around you consistently. And that's
Mm.
by definition what a senior plus plus is. No, it's somebody who brings a lot of value and can take on more work, help other teams grow, and so on and so forth. And one thing you need to do as a staff engineer is all of these things, plus train other senior engineers, help them grow in certain areas, prepare them to be staff engineers or managers or
Mm.
whatever they want to be. So yes, you do need to be that, but no, you don't, in the sense like it's not like a given, because a lot of super senior engineers can never be staff. Some of them don't want to be staff engineers. Just
Yes.
like, for example, personally, I don't want to be a manager because a lot of things that comes with being a manager are not things I want to be dealing with on a
Mm.
day-to-day basis. No, like, again, as I said, like, one of them is politics, and you see, like, you have to be political as a staff engineer, but to a way lesser extent. Like, as a manager, you have to be super political, watch everything you do and say, and so on and so forth. And it's not something I want to deal with every single day of my life. No. So this is one of the main reasons I never wanted to be an engineering
Mm.
manager. Now that can change, obviously, but I'm just saying,
Yes.
like, it's not something I wanted to do. So TLDR of all of this is, yes, you have to become a staff engineer. You have to be a senior plus plus, but a senior plus plus does not necessarily have or can become a staff engineer.
Yes, I understand. You need to be high level technical, but maybe you don't want to be a staff iOS engineer. I know that
Yeah,
there is a lot of developers, a lot of knowledge, are very, very great as in their role, but they don't like to be a manager or
yeah.
staff iOS
And especially
engineer.
because, like, a lot of the, as I said, like, one part is you don't know what you're going to be dealing with.
Yes.
And another part is you're going to be dealing with a lot of things that you don't know. Like, I've never had to work, for example, on a hiring process or on, like, it's not even about architecture. Like, architecture is the least of a staff engineer's work, I feel. Like, it's not what you need to be focused on, because again, like, how, like, are you familiar with the graph where it's like whenever they want to, like, I don't know, like whenever they want to show somebody who uses a tool or whatever, so it's like
Shards
flat line,
thing.
peak, and then flat line. No,
Yes.
this is exactly it. Like, you have a junior engineer, like senior, and then you're a staff with, like, how dumb things need to be, because, like, when you're a senior engineer, you're trying to prove yourself, you're trying to prove you can do the most sophisticated technical thing, etc., to, like, to optimize for the 0.01%. Whereas as a staff engineer, you understand, like, yes, this optimization, is it bringing me value for me, for the team, for the company? It's not. So why am I wasting time on it? So this is, like, something else that some people don't want to deal with. Like, they still want to be those super nerdy guys. Like, I had senior engineers on my team when I was a staff engineer that definitely knew about Swift UI 10 times better than I did, because
Mm.
I never rode the Swift UI wave. I managed to evade it. Now with AI, a lot of the things, like, I don't even need to know, like, especially if that part of the code is being written for me. But those who were on day one with Swift UI, who are probably much younger than I am, so, like, they were introduced to Swift
Yes, I
UI
understand.
directly, they knew much more than I did. They knew the itty bitty of every single thing. Now, as a staff
Animation,
engineer,
data.
if exactly, like, as a staff engineer, I don't know, I can't do an animation to save my life in Swift UI. But the thing is, like, as a staff engineer, you understand, like, even without AI now, you understand how to look for a solution, how to apply it, how to, like, you have the high level knowledge of, on how things work. And when you need to get deep into a single thing, you'll go ahead and do it, no? And a big part of the staff role is delegating, because, again, writing code is the easiest thing to do. So me writing the, even, like, again, let's put AI to the side. Even before AI, like, as a staff engineer, you're not expected to write every single line of code. Now, obviously, you need to write code because you need to, for many reasons. One of them is, like, to even be up to date with things. But the last bit of any properly done feature, properly done architecture, properly done anything is the code implementation. No, you have
Mm.
the architecture, you have the system design, you have the API design, you have a lot of things that goes into things before actually implementing it. And a lot of people don't know that and don't do that because a lot of companies don't allow you to do that. No, because all a company cares about is, are you shipping or not? And and if you can ship something in 8 hours, you need to ship it in 8 hours rather than doing it in 10, and properly understanding how you're doing things. No, so that's it. Like, as a staff, you're more into understanding things high level. What's the what's it gonna cost from a engineering point of view? What do we have? How can we make it fit? All those kind of things to optimize for the future rather than the present, basically.
Yes, thank you. Great. I come to understand much better the difference between this role of senior plus plus iOS developer and staff iOS engineer. You spoke about the role, the relationship between technical leaders and staff iOS engineering. Especially, I have one question about how to handle conflicts because I think there is some kind of conflicts between technical leader and staff iOS engineering. What kind of conflicts that you face it in your role? And I know you speak about political role. It's important to have this kind of soft skills, political skills, sorry, to handle some kind of problem because the team leader think, okay, I have developers with me. I'm the leader of the team. I think that your idea about, I don't know, using Xcode Gen instead of Twist, it's not a good idea. We didn't have the ability, the technical level. We have a lot of technical depth that try to we try to resolve this before speaking about I don't know, modularization,
Yeah,
something like that.
absolutely.
Can you speak
So
about this kind
yeah,
of role?
absolutely. So there's two sides to that coin, let's say, because you have, like, as a staff engineer, you're dealing with leadership and then you're dealing with everybody else on the team, no? And leadership obviously has their own expectations. You have your own expectations and roadmap, let's say, and then the team has their own from a product point of view and what they would like to do and not do, etc. One important thing, obviously, is to plan ahead. So as we said, like, as a staff engineer, you're never going to go to the team and be like, okay, now we need to do this or whatever. Like, it's always like you're planning ahead for the next cycle, for the next year. Like, you have your
Mm,
usually as is, because then again, you have, and we're not going to dive into it, but you have a staff, you have a senior staff, and then you have a principal engineer, and all
mm,
of those are planning for different timelines. As a staff engineer, you're dealing with 6 to 12 months. Okay, like where you would like to be in
okay.
6 months, where you would like to be in 12 months. You're not worried about where you are now. So when dealing with leadership, like the way to handle conflict is always because the problem with leadership, like, you can say no to a certain extent, because, and which is the same thing the other team can do with you, because at the end of the day, they hold the final power. So if
Mm,
they say we need to do this, we need to do this, no? So it's really important to, if they ask you for whatever they like, we need, I don't know, 100% test coverage, just for the sake of argument,
okay.
no? And you know damn well you're never gonna have 100%, and it's
Yes.
useless to have 100%. You don't have the capacity to do 100%. So rather than be like, we can't, be like, okay, here's what we can do. Given our capacity, given all the roadmap that we have, all these, what we can do, first of all, you try to understand why they need this, because hopefully you're not in a company where they're like, we need test coverage because my cousin told me it's great. Because probably
Mm,
we had an incident or two or whatever. So there you can be
yes.
like, okay, let's take these 2 or 3 incidents that we had and our 2 or 3 most important flows in the app that we need to be sure that they are robust, for example, the payments and the onboarding, and let's make sure we are testing every single important flow to at least 80%, because that 1% edge case, who cares about it? Because by doing this, we are guaranteed to lower our problems by 70%, 80%, whatever the case might be, depending on the numbers. No leader in their right mind will say no to that. So the politics in it is to understand what you can deliver, not overpromise, but give something to leadership. So you can, and that, by doing this, you're not making your team commit 100% to one thing, so you can bring in your agenda with whatever you have in mind. You're giving them maybe 30%, because in 30, like, you'll do the math. Okay, next quarter, if we take 30% of our time dedicated to tech stuff to do these kind of testing, we can cover this. Now you have the remaining 70%. That 70%, you can split it between 40 to 50%, 30 to 50%, whatever you envision the thing to be, because at the end of the day, these are the values that nobody are expecting from you, that you can showcase that, hey, we improved this, we improved this, we improved this. And then you keep that 20, 30% where you discuss with your team, hey, what are the things that you want to work on? And then you plan with them. One key thing
Mm,
I used to do is I had a weekly meeting with my team to discuss bottlenecks every week. No, so all
Yes.
the iOS engineers, 1 hour, we can discuss anything and everything. That was a problem, just to understand, especially when I joined, because I didn't know what their problem were. They were not familiar with my role. That, like, a lot of things were not going great. And in that meeting, we discussed things, and whenever there was a problem, I used to put it in my notes and like start planning for how we can solve it. No, and a lot of times, the first thing I remember when I joined was we need to fix the architecture, which is every engineer's wet dream, basically. But
Yes.
the thing that nobody understands, that there's so many things that you need to do to get a proper architecture. No, especially when you have a legacy code base of 8+ years, where you have stuff that are not
Yes.
documented, or not, like, every guy and I'm the first one to do that. Every guy want to just rip everything apart and start from scratch, because it's just much easier to write things from scratch than to fix them. And basically, they're like, you need to, okay, you want to do the architecture, great, here are the things that we need to do in order to get a modularized architecture. You need to, for example, easy win is separating DTO models from the main models. Let's start
Yes.
by doing that. No, so that work alone is gonna take, like, that probably took a whole quarter to do, because we had like
Very.
over 200 models,
Yes.
300, like, and then especially when you want to extract stuff, and then you have files importing classes that they shouldn't have imported, because when you extract them, then you have circular dependencies and all these kind of issues. No,
Mm.
so when we started doing that, obviously I had pushback at the start, because how hard is it to do an architecture? Like, let's do MVVM. Okay, you want to do MVVM, but like, in order to get to that VM, there's that view model, the amount of stuff you need to do to properly do a view model where it doesn't just turn to a massive view model rather than a massive view
Yes.
controller is a lot. No, and this is what people don't understand. Like, and it's not because they don't, because a lot of the issues are when senior engineers are learning, they learn from these tutorial where everything is like 5 files, 6 files. No, this is
Mm.
how you do it, and everything seems so easy until you need to do it. So a lot of it, so when you're dealing with, be it the tech lead, the senior engineers, it's again about compromise. Okay, want to do the architecture, great, this is how we can do it. But and you do the same thing. So in order for you to be able to do this, which is something you like and you enjoy, you need to do this as well, which is something that leadership is requiring. No, so it's basic. This is where the politics is, like balancing out all these things alongside what you think is the best as well, which obviously is discussed with leadership when you're presenting the vision, and balancing all of this out to have something solid at the end that everybody is happy with. And it's really important to remember that you can never make everybody happy, and it's really about compromise.
I have a question about that because
Please.
I know that refactoring something related to refactoring, and this kind of compromise is not related also to what developers, staff iOS and technical leader hope, because there is some other part of the discussion about the stakeholders, because they need to you need to produce things, and to make this kind of refactoring, etc., you need time and you need budgets, and how you can, as a staff iOS engineering, dealing with the stakeholder, to convince him that we need to make refactoring, and maybe refactoring take time, quarter, I don't know. And this at this moment we need to have this kind of methodology of refactoring, and also I don't know, maybe we need to stop developing
Yeah.
at this moment.
So, okay. So, to be honest, one thing I learned, and that's my opinion, doesn't need to be true, but in my opinion, if you need to stop developing to refactor, you're doing it wrong. Because, again, like, uh, from an engineering point of view, that's what you want to do. No, you want to be like, I'm done with the mess. Let me start do this. Like, let me do this from scratch and properly do it. No, and that's never gonna happen in any company, because no, like, refactoring code doesn't pay the bills. Okay, like, definitely not directly, and even indirectly, because you're improving the code quality, the time to market, the, like, all of these things are improved. Obviously, they bring more money and bring more value. But no, like, at least I never dealt with a scenario where everything needed to be stopped and refactored. Because if that's the case, the way to do it is, like, for example, when I was in Yassir with the, like, as a staff engineer, and we work on this thing, one thing we decided to do is, okay, let's define our North Star architecture. Where do we see this being whenever everything is done? great. Let's start with every new feature. This is how we do it.
Great.
And then everything, because again, even if you like, unless every new feature that you're working, okay, even if it's in an existing screen, can be extracted and done separately, and you just call a function that displays it. So that's where I'm saying, like, if you really need to refactor, you don't need to stop development. You can do it in parallel. You can like, there the best thing is like to negotiate, hey, let's slow down development. But that's what where the like the way you said it is how I hear every engineer say it, and this is where you're wrong. When you say we need to stop and do this in order to do that, that's never
Mhm.
going to happen. What you need to understand is have a plan of, okay, rather than me giving you 5 features this quarter, let me give you 3 and or 4, and let me take that remaining time to refactor. And like there's no, like, how many times we touch old code? Like, seriously, this is the other thing. Like, from a huge application, like if you're in a huge application, no, and something is working, yes, it's legacy and it's making me great. Just do a what do you call it? Forgot the word. A facade layer, or a whatever layer
Yes.
between old stuff and new
Wrapper,
stuff.
something like that.
Exactly, like a wrapper to bridge, like a bridge between the two, and start doing the stuff correctly. And that old thing can exist until it doesn't need to. No, then whenever you need to start, and that's why I said, like, when you have the North Star and you understand system design, and this is why where you need a staff engineer or somebody with experience that is not experimenting, because that's like a real important difference, to come in and explain how things need to be done, because there's a lot of different architectures, no, and there's not one architecture that is correct for every single scenario, no.
Yes.
For the most part, I've worked with MVVM. Currently, I'm working with TCA, and like every one of them has their pros and cons, and what do you really need. But again, like, a lot of people are just thinking about that view model, view up, and that's it. Like, all the lower stuff, nobody's talking about. You know, like, how do you design an API? How do you handle errors? Like, there's a lot of things that goes into system design beyond the view and the view model. And once you define that, you can start first by, as we said, bridging old stuff, new stuff, and just the new stuff, commit to it. And whenever you need to, and that's the other thing, whenever you tell engineers, like, the way to make them not want to refactor anymore, tell them, okay, you want to do it? Great. Whenever you touch old code, fix it. That's all you need. Like, if
Yes.
everybody takes, rather than doing your PR in 1 hour, 2 hour, one day, take a couple more hours and fix something in that PR, okay? The code is automatically going to improve, and it's going to be easier to test, and it's going to be easier to deal with. So that's when it comes to the engineers. And when it comes to stakeholders, a lot of times when I want to deal with refactoring, like, of course, if you have a 99.99 crash free sessions on Crashlytics and everything is working, nobody's going to allow you to refactor, because, like, why are we touching something that's working? And it's understandable, because
Yes.
again, it doesn't pay the bills. If you have issues with your application that is caused by, hey, I'm just switching one line, it's breaking 700 things, great. We go back to the previous conversation we just had. You come up with a plan, you go to the stakeholder, and you're like, okay, we need to write tests for this, this, and this. And in order to do it, we need to do this, this, and this. We start by refactoring this. Like, you need to have a plan. Like, your plan cannot always be, let's do everything from scratch. And again, everybody does that. I still do that. Like, whenever I join my team now, I had the idea of, okay, you know what? Because I inherited code that's not documented, there's no continuity, etc. I was like, okay, let me just rewrite it. For a lot of reasons now that are too detailed, like, ended up not doing it. But that's the thing. Like, it's really about, and if I ever decide that I need to do it, I know how to deliver that message, how to explain, because you can do it in parallel. You can write one feature at a time. Like, there's a lot of ways to do it. Obviously, the message cannot be, hey, next quarter, count me out, I'm refactoring. Like, this is never going to happen.
Yes. Great. Thank you. Let's come to a question about the relation about iOS staff engineering and the other, maybe the staff iOS engineering for the backend team. I don't know. You have this conversation with the other team, especially with backend, and what kind of discussion, what kind of topics discuss?
Sure. So yes, so for example, again, in my experience as a staff engineer, we had a staff engineer for every role. So we had like, in our domain, we had iOS, Android, backend, and web. So we had the staff engineers. I never dealt with web just because there was nothing to deal with. With Android, mostly it was about, like, I don't know, how we want to track errors, how we want to, like,
Mhm.
those high level cross-platform things discussion, no? Or if we're dealing with the design system, these kind of things, like anything that is cross. With the backend was the most discussions whenever there was need there. Like one topic, for example, this is like when I say like the staff engineer, it's not about your impact today, but how you can improve the company. One topic I remember we worked on with the backend staff engineer was, for example, code contracts and how to improve the interaction between backend engineers and like front end in general, not even iOS. And this is where like we had a conversation with Android as well, because like one thing I noticed was a lot of the engineers were complaining. First of all, one of it was they were right. The other, I just feel it's always an excuse by engineers. The right part is like the backend API changes without any knowledge. It breaks stuff, etc. And that's obviously a serious problem. And the other one
Yes.
is I can't develop stuff because I don't have the API call as well. That is utter bullshit. Like you can fix it in so many different ways. But to fix both and to fix issues in general, like we work on introducing, for example, an API contract that the backend engineer and iOS engineer need to work on, define, and agree on before anything is done. And if you think, and that's what, again, to go back to what we said previously, writing the code should be the last thing any engineer does. And unfortunately, it's not, because every engineer, like a lot of engineers, I would say the vast majority, learn things while they experiment rather than sit down and think. Like you just write the code, compile, and hope it works, rather than understanding what you're doing and understanding if that's really the correct thing. No. So we worked on like defining how the contract should be. We did for example, did a brief session on how, okay, hey, you're an iOS engineer, you're a backend engineer, this is how you should communicate, define the tools that they should use. So for example, the open API specs, like how you define it, the documentation, etc. Because there was a lack of documentation as well. And again, the same conversation the backend engineer had with his team. Whenever you touch an API, take a moment and document everything, because when you document it, it makes it easier for everybody to interact. So these are the things, like there's a lot of problems in your day-to-day development, be it an iOS, a front-end engineer, like anybody, any dependency that you have, you are probably having a problem with. And as a staff engineer, you try and help with solving those dependencies.
But sometimes the choice that come from backend can influence our work as
Yeah.
front-end developers.
Yeah.
Especially, I don't know, choosing the choice to have microservice instead of BFF, creating BFF. It's create a problem from the front-end team to make a lot of calls, maybe to, for example, to finalize a transaction, you need to make 3, 4, 5
Yeah.
codes that have an influence. This is why, because they have sometimes the choice to have this kind of stateless architecture using microservice, etc. The role of staff iOS engineer to convince or so to maybe to speak with the engineering manager that maybe have some kind of influence on staff backend engineering, etc. You think that is good? The good thing that okay, the staff iOS engineering can speak about some technical choices that come from other team. You think that's good, or maybe they
Absolutely.
try to create conflicts with the other teams?
No. Absolutely, but that's the thing. Like, no, that absolutely, because again, like, as we said, like a staff engineer, yes, you are vertical on your domain, but I mean, even not even a staff engineer, any engineer at this point, you need to understand a lot of things.
Yes.
Like, you can't be like a senior iOS, and I mean a lot of people are, but you can't be a senior any engineer and you don't high level understand the other domain. Like I don't understand how a backend engineer can be a senior backend engineer and not understand how the front end consumes the data. No,
Mm.
you can't be a iOS engineer and not understand how the obviously you don't need to understand how the backend interacts with a database on a detailed level, but just understand like high level. No, just like you cannot be not versed in product or design or whatever the case might be. Like I don't understand a senior iOS engineer that doesn't understand design.
Mm.
This is part of your job. No, but to go back to the main topic, so yes, whenever you're facing an issue, and again, this is like one of the topics that maybe I dealt with the backend engineer, like with the staff backend engineer, is okay, we have like these issues, we're making 3, 4 calls. Again, it's always understanding what is the impact, because if it's only, hey, I have to write 4 API calls as an iOS
No
engineer,
problem.
Exactly. They're gonna be like tough shit.
Yes,
Like deal with it. No, if it's
yes.
impacting, I don't know, like I don't know, 1 in 10 calls, one of the calls are failing and everything is failing, and if we can like because for example we
There's a lot
are
of scenario
in
about
North
this.
Africa where there's not a good connection, etc. Like there, you try to work with them again. The same thing. Okay, you want to do microservices? Great. We're not gonna change the whole backend. Can we do a mid layer where we interact with it? That does everything for us, and then we come back with the answer. So again, always about compromise. So as a staff iOS engineer, obviously you need to understand how the backend works, how Android works, because a lot of times there's stuff in common, especially when it comes to the backend and design. So these are things you are expected to know. You have a weekly, I'm assuming in every company, staff engineers have for each domain, have a weekly meeting with the head of engineering, CTO, like with leadership in general, to discuss those bottlenecks, because we are not working in islands. Like the iOS app
Mm,
doesn't work without the backend team, doesn't work without the ops team. So there's a lot of like, especially because in like in more developed companies, you have your own infrastructure team, your own ops team. You're not so there's a lot of teams that need to work together, that you need to optimize together. To like if you have a problem with the CI and the iOS team is not expected to work on the CI because we have a dedicated infrastructure team, we have specific issues. As a staff engineer, again, I know how the CI works. I don't know every single thing about CI, but I can have a high level conversation with somebody. Or if I don't understand the problem, I try to research it, understand it, and go and have the conversation with their staff engineer and try to find a compromise, a solution, or work on if a compromise can't be reached quickly and we need a more detailed solution to work on it in the long run.
great. Thank you, Faraz. It was great discussion about this because I think in every company we have this kind of conversation between backend team, front end team, etc. And that come to another part of our discussion about authority, this kind of leadership and authority, because you are not a manager, but I think from the book they think you are not a manager, you are a leader, and this kind of influence of decision without this kind of formal authority, how you can have this, because people, okay, you are not our manager, you are just staff iOS engineering, maybe we have some afraid of you because you can tell our manager about things that have maybe we faced the problem if we didn't have kind of respect. But I think that the respect in everything in our life should be due to leadership, to respect to leadership. And how do you influence this? I know that you are a speaker, etc. It's easy for you,
No,
but
no, no, no.
imagine that simple senior iOS developer, I don't know, in the
Yeah.
world, come to be a staff iOS engineering, and no one know about him. How can have this kind of authority, not influence authority? I don't like this kind of authority. Yes,
Well, you said first of all, yeah, like the word in itself is awful, like authority, as if you're
yes,
babysitting someone. So again,
yes.
here it differs whether you're being promoted in your company or you're joining a new company, and it depends on the company as well. Like for example, again, as I said, currently at Get Your Guide, we have staff engineers, but they don't decide directly what the senior should or should not do. No, like I work with the staff engineer just like any senior engineer, because the staff engineer at Get Your Guide is somebody whose work influences several teams, no, and not his own team. So he's a senior engineer that can help several teams at the same time, for example. But to put it in a simple manner, no, it's not somebody who's expected to mentor every single iOS engineer or whatever. Okay, because of the company structure and how we are, because at Get Your Guide we have like one senior iOS engineer per squad, and that's it, and you're responsible of whatever you're working on. Whereas for example in Yassir, when I was a staff engineer, I was expected to mentor directly all those senior engineers, to deal with them on a day-to-day basis, etc. And when I first joined, I did face some problems, because again, not only I was the new staff engineer, I was the first staff engineer as well. No, so people
Mhm.
didn't even know what I am, what I'm supposed to do. And as you said, like I have my engineering manager, so he'll tell me what to do. Why are you telling me what to do? These kind of things. So first I try to, like, I usually try to lead by example in general. And like whatever I need to do, like, hey, if I'm doing it, you should do it too. Like you should be able at least to do it too. When I faced pushback from certain engineers, I went to my head of engineering, had a discussion with him, and I was like, I don't think my role is understood by the team members, like what they, especially when I started to understand what he expects from me, you know? So I
Mm,
was like, they don't see that. So I think it needs to be communicated explicitly. And they did that through the managers, no? And lo and behold, like the three people I had pushback from, all three were fired again for not being committed on, like they had the mentality of, hey, I'm here, I'm getting my paycheck, who cares? Like I don't care, no.
mm,
So when you're joining a new team, um it's sensitive because again, like you don't know what you're expected to do. A lot of the team members probably don't, especially if you're the first staff engineer, like it's a new position being added. So it's really important to, and obviously the feedback you're gonna receive or you're gonna be given to your that's gonna be given, sorry, to your manager is gonna be from those engineers. You know? So obviously you want to balance out how you deal with them with how you can help them, especially when there's like people underperforming or not
yes.
committed, etc. And especially that on one hand, you're not their manager in their head, and on the other hand, most likely you don't even want to be a manager. Like you don't want to have to deal with the day-to-day drama, no? So it's really what, like I had issues at the start. I had like people complaining, for example, on how I speak or like my tone, be it, or my choice of words, etc. Because and that, for example, mainly came from the fact that I've always worked in Europe, like all my career,
Mm,
where especially in Italy, where like nobody is that serious when you're like when you're talking, when you're conversating, or the structures of the company I worked in were very horizontal. No, like you have your manager, but like you're a junior or you're like, I remember when I was at Bending Spoons, when you were, whether you were a junior engineer or a senior engineer or a tech lead, like your
mm,
opinion mattered. You can share it.
yes.
Like it's like you're not talking like I'm not a junior and I should be afraid of my senior, etc. No? Whereas when I joined Yassir, I noted, and that's not again not a knock on Yassir, but just like the mentality in the Middle East is like I have my manager will tell me what to do, he will give me feedback. If you have anything to say to me, you'll tell it to my manager and he tell it to me, which is insane to me because I've always worked in a environment where feedback is appreciated, where feedback, like if something is wrong, I should be like literally in my current company, I felt like something happened. I from a staff engineer, by the way, and I felt like what he did was not okay. I went to him. I was like, "Hey, this happened a couple of days ago. I have some feedback. We talked about it." He was like, "You're right. My bad. I'll do it better next time." Like it was that
Yes.
simple. Like didn't involve the manager. The manager that probably, if he watches this podcast, like it'll be the first time he hear about it. Like it didn't have to involve the manager because it was so silly. No, but it really depends on like the background you're dealing with, etc. So to continue answering your main question, that won't be a problem if you are a staff engineer promoted in that company, because all engineers usually, like every company, every team in every company has that one engineer that everybody goes to whenever there's a problem, no?
Yes.
And that's what leadership is. Like, this is what whether you're a staff or a senior, whatever you are, this is what you need to aim to become. And the way you become it, just ask yourself, why am I going to that person? And the answer is always because he's the one who's working more hard, not more, but harder than everyone. He's the one who's, whenever there's a problem, he's jumping to solve it.
Mm,
He's the one who's asking the questions. So these are the things that define a leader. No, a leader is not somebody who tells other what to do, but he's somebody who inspire others to want to be better and to want to do better. And this is why you go to that person. Like I remember at Yassir in my team, we had a guy called Muad. Like he's a really, really good engineer.
mm,
And he was naturally the person, like he was the person who people naturally went to whenever they had a question about the code base, more to him than to me, for example, because he's been there for a longer
yes.
time. He had more knowledge. He was working with them every day. And again, like ironically, because he was a senior engineer, so at their level, they felt more comfortable going to ask him than maybe asking a staff engineer who's a
Yes.
level above because of that mentality. So I hope that answers your
Anders.
question.
Yes, yes, it's great. Understand. Much more. I hope that people that listen to us or see us understand this. We know this is the real reality of working in company everywhere in the world. And what we discuss in this podcast, I think that a lot of people think, okay, this is the same thing that we lived in our company. That's why it's a question. This discussion, I try to be. We try to also to be very honest about the reality, because we try to don't speak about magical things. This is the reality of things, and it's very important to me. When I read your article, first thing, this Safa, it's very honest. Speak clearly about things. It's very important to me to invite people that have this mindset, because there is a lot of sorry people that speak about dream company that didn't exist for me. No problem with that. That come maybe a very complicated question about have you ever been ignored about some important topic, and how you handle this, because sometimes when problem comes they try to have the solution without contacting the staff iOS engineering,
Yeah,
or and
yeah,
how you face it in kind, maybe you don't face it this, but maybe you listen about people that about
yeah.
staff iOS engineering that face it this, and I think that some brutality about face it, that's very harmful.
Sure. So that I feel is a two-part answer. Meaning, first of all, as a staff engineer, as we said many times so far, like I'm not worried about the day-to-day things in the sense that if you have a good idea, you want to do it, and it has minor like my work and the staff engineer's work is to deal with things that are hard to reverse. No, like if you're changing an architecture, that's hard to reverse, and a staff engineer or a responsible, whatever you want to call him, somebody should call the shot, and he should be responsible of the outcome.
Okay.
Anything that can be easily reversible should not go through the staff engineer necessarily. So that is the first thing. Now, if I discuss with the team, and that's an important thing, and that's again, at least from my experience. In my experience, I used to discuss with the team everything that we needed to do before actually doing it. So it's not, I wasn't some mythical figure that just did stuff and then they had to deal with. Like we met at least once a week, sometimes even 2 or 3 times. For example, like at one point I felt like the communication in the team was not great, so I introduced a meeting post sprint planning just to discuss high level and like help the team get used to communicating, and another one was like just to do technical discussions. But we had that one meeting that was from day one that I joined, where we discuss every topic, every bottleneck, and we discuss even the solution before I apply it. So I'll tell you like, hey, we have this problem. I'll take that week or two needed, try to come up with a solution, write the RFC, have it reviewed, whatever. We'll discuss
Mm.
it and then we'll decide it. Now, if we decide something, this is where like once we agree, and I had so many pushbacks on so many different topics, and this is where like the hey, I decide card can be useful, especially obviously for the most part I like to do majority vote just because for the most part there's not a like everything is gray, hardly it's black or white. So we can like, especially when it comes to like the actual code, like the team can decide what they prefer because they're the one dealing with everything on a day-to-day basis. When it is black and white, I'll explain why it's black and not white or vice versa. No, one thing that is really important is to let everybody share their opinion and not it's not I know it's going to come off bad, but make them feel like their opinion matter even when it doesn't. If that, like, I know it's really bad to say, but like I don't want it to be clipped and just
Yes.
but what I'm saying, like in some scenario, like when a decision is made from the top down that hey, I don't know, we need to use Firebase. No,
Right.
it's not even your decision anymore. Like just we need to use this. Like you'll hear them articulate with them why this is a good or a bad idea or whatever. But at the end of the day, even if every engineer thinks it's a bad idea, I think it's a bad idea. But hey, we need to do this. We need to do this. Period. Like it's not negotiable. But it's something that because you are less likely to receive pushback when you hear other people and you validate their ideas. Even I'm of the idea that there are some stupid questions, but even when they come, like
Yes.
it's important to like interact with them, even make them understand where they
To
were
try to
wrong in their
understand, to think
exactly in their
maybe.
understanding or whatever. No,
Yes.
and sometimes you like I remember that one guy in my last company who would not understand. Like I tried to explain in 700 different ways why putting the view model inside of the environment variable is the worst thing you can do. Okay, I explained it every single way, every single possible way. At the end, he was like, "Yeah, but what?" I was like, at the end, I was like, "Hey, this is what we're doing. Period. Now, this is what we did. Had he done differently, which that's what I'm saying. Like, so that part never. I remember actually, probably it happened, but I don't have a concrete example now, but had it happened, this is where like I'll step back and have the manager step in, because
Mm.
to go back to the main point, I'm not here to manage people. Like, I'll try to explain to the extent that I can. I'll try to help to the extent that I can. But then at one point, it's like, hey, you're being disruptive. This is not my thing to deal with. Like, I'll let the manager deal with it. It's like, hey, this is what we did. This is where we agreed. This is what he's doing. And then I'll let the manager deal with it.
Okay, great. I think that come to one. I think my last question about so
Go for
complicated
it.
question is that stuff iOS engineering justified as role, especially mobile? Because I think okay, we don't need this role. We think that maybe for the backend because it's complicated, etc. It's justified to have this role after this experience of 2 years. You think that okay? I think that you can say that it depends of the
Yeah.
company and
Yeah, no,
understand that.
obviously that goes without saying.
Yes,
But to those companies, yeah.
yes. But you think that maybe in, I don't know, things change very, very quickly, especially with this AI revolution. And this kind of role, staff iOS engineering, lead developers, technical leaders, even the role of iOS developer, it will be justified in 2 years, 3 years. From your point of
So
view, especially
yeah,
with
no,
this
absolutely.
revolution of AI.
So that's a good question. But a couple of things. First of all, anybody who thinks mobile development is less complicated than backend development, actually in 2026, is insane to say the least. Just like not to use a different word, because
Okay.
I know there's always this conversation, what's is harder front, like I cannot write a CSS code to save my life. Like, and people always think that front end development is easy, no? Like, try to write CSS or try to do this or try, like, every set of, every platform, every thing has its own set of problems and challenges and optimizations that you have to deal with, no? Like, a backend engineer doesn't have to worry about Apple throwing out their app from the App Store just because they don't like one thing, or you don't think about what do you call it? The speed in which your app, like the app launch time, like there's a lot of things that you need to optimize. Obviously, if you're building a weather app that's 2 pages, like you're just calling an API or building a calculator, these are non-issues. But in bigger companies, like when you're building an app like Facebook, like Twitter, like whatever the case might be, those are big applications with a lot of things that they are doing. Or like a WeChat, like imagine an app like WeChat, you say it's easy to build, no? So obviously, as of today, the role of a staff engineer is very important in those companies. And it's not about and again, and we talked about this when we had the conversation offline, it's not about the title, no? Because especially nowadays, you have more CTOs than senior engineers, and they're CTOs of like a 2 people company. Like, so it's not about the title, no? The title, like, I never deal or worry about the title in my life. And this is what I even said in my article. Like, I personally don't. Would I want to be a staff engineer? Yes. Do I care about the title? If you're paying me more as a senior engineer, I don't care. Like, I'm still doing my job. I'm still like getting paid. I'm still having the same impact. So for me, it's like, as long as I'm impacting and I'm not just like writing code that somebody's telling me to do and I'm getting paid well, you can call me a junior for all I care now.
Mm.
So aside from the title in itself, the role of the staff engineer, that doesn't deal with the day-to-day stuff, so not the one that's acting like a tech lead, is very much needed today. And in the long run, it is needed. Like, I don't know, like 3 years now seems like a long time. Like before, 3 years was
Yes.
like 3 years, how much can change in can change in 3 years. In 3 years, I couldn't, nobody can tell, and everybody who says they
Yes.
can is probably lying. One thing is for sure, like in 3 years, most likely yes. Like if I had to bet, I would say yes. It's just that the bar will be higher, because now, like before, a senior engineer was somebody who can write really great code at a really great speed, and like the senior plus plus was you can do better, like, no. And all of this is fading away. Like everything that has to, like, everybody now needs to move towards architecting and reading code, no? Like, I'm doing more code review than writing code now, no? And again, like, a lot of us think about this and the impact of AI on companies depending on the company you work in. Like in my company, we're fortunate to have the company give us all the AI tools that we need, and we can write code and burn through tokens, at least for now, without having to worry about the cost. No, a lot of companies cannot afford that. No, so you have maybe a $20 subscription, and in a lot of companies you have to get your own subscription. It's not like everybody's moving at the same speed. No, like one article I wanted to write, I just didn't know how to frame it, is like, you're not behind, you're just broke basically, and this is why you're not advancing in AI, because it costs a lot of money that people don't realize, like when you're dealing with AI. So but it's like, so in the lower tier companies, I would say it's more needed more than ever, because if you cannot afford to burn through millions and millions and millions of tokens per month and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars per month for tokens, you need that figure that will at least help you understand how to move in the next 6 months to 1 year without all this AI revolution on top. And in companies where that AI bill can be paid easily, the staff engineer will just change again. Like it will change to a higher level where, like, okay, how can we integrate AI in our workflow? Because again, that will become a senior engineer, uses the AI tool to write code and understands the architecture. But how can we include it in our workflow to enhance it for the future? So what you're doing as a staff engineer, at least what I was doing, will change, not drastically, I think in the next 2 years, I don't know, in the next 5. But it's still gonna be needed, because you always need that one person that can make the decision that everybody else can follow. And because this is how human nature is, no, you need that point of reference for that person that can guide you into being better and doing better. And again, like with AI, it's gonna be easier to become and harder to become a staff engineer at the same time, I feel, because again, as a staff, it's not like a lot of people focus on like, because still in their mind, a staff engineer is a really, 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 really good senior engineer, when in reality he is, but he's also somebody who knows and does way more than just coding, way more than helping his team, way more than impacting one domain. It's about impacting mentality, it's about impacting how engineers work, about how
Yes.
engineers develop. So there's a lot of things that go on in that position other than writing code. So hopefully it's still going to be around in a couple of years, and I'll be a staff
Yes.
engineer again by
We
then.
don't know. Maybe you'll be staff iOS engineering for agents, for AI
Yeah,
agents.
exactly.
Agents.
Exactly.
Imagine.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Staff agents engineer. Yeah.
Yes, imagine this role. Okay, with this last question, I thank you for this discussion. It was.
Thank you
I
again
hope
for
that
having
it
me.
was a great discussion with you, and I hope that we find you in another episode of the Swift Academy podcast with other topics, maybe about related to
Gladly.
AI. Yes, thank you for accepting the invitation, Firas,
Thank
and
you for having me.
see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.